Hey guys, welcome to Celia's Playlists. Today I am here with David Clark Carroll, songwriter and multi instrumentalist who performs under the name Daring Coyotes. Hey David, how's it going?
Hey Celia, thanks so much for having me on.
Of course, of course. So David, let's just start off with the question that we have to do for context. So tell us a little bit about you and your performing and what it is that you do.
Thanks, Celia. For about the last 10, 12 years or so, I've played bluegrass music. I lived out in Northern California and got hooked into a real great community out there. Started playing gigs, joined bands, got around, and of course started writing songs. And then, when I moved back to Massachusetts, before I left, I recorded all those songs and put out an album.
That's awesome. I love that you play bluegrass music because that's not typically the answer that I get when I ask people, what kind of music do you play? So, like, why bluegrass? And like, today's day and age, there's so many different kinds of music, but bluegrass has such, like, a traditional, like, I guess, pathway to music of the past.
I mean, really, it was the community. I got hooked on playing mandolin after seeing Sam Bush Band play. And you take your mandolin to jams, and eventually you wind up at bluegrass jams. And you're like, these people are awesome. They're fun. There's a depth and history to the music, and it the community is just awesome. Is really at the end of the day, that's what drew me into it so strongly.
So, like, what does a bluegrass jam I guess entail? Because I've been to jams, but like, is it banjos and mandolins or like what is a bluegrass jam?
So I've been realizing, like, particularly on social media, I mentioned I was at this jam, and there's kind of a disconnect between people who are used to the traditional music world and people who aren't. And an open bluegrass jam can be a cluster pluck where you've got like five banjos, five mandolins, a couple guitars, maybe some fiddlers, or it can be like three or four people in the corner of a bar holding down like Grand Old Opry, Nashville caliber, uh, you know, crazy fiddle tunes, and everything in between. But nine times out of 10, if you see open bluegrass jam on a flyer, you can show up and give it a try. We're friendly people.
That's really great. And I love that you bring this back to like, community because that's like basically like what I'm trying to do here on the internet. And I know that like, in different areas and like there are larger communities and there are areas that don't have so much community. So I'm glad to hear that you found a community that is good for you and was able to like develop your style from learning from the people around you.
Yeah, no, I mean, the people, I used to live in Nevada County, California, northeast of Sacramento, and the depth of the talent that retired up there and taught me most of what I know is just kind of unreal.
That's really cool because like we've kind of mentioned, bluegrass has like a long history and if these people picked it up like early in their career, they have like, developed their own style through a number of years of performing. So it allows for a lot of interesting like, techniques to be developed.
And performing, that's, I think, the bread and butter of it too. Like
Mhm.
this fiddler I learned a lot from. He was part of various bands in Minnesota over the years, toured, and by the time I met him, he'd tried just about every fiddle lick on the planet,
Mhm.
and he knew what he liked, he knew what worked in certain settings and what didn't.
I gotcha, which is really cool. So that kind of brings me forward to like, I want to talk a little bit about your writing style. So, like, what is your process when you come up with a song? Is it starting with the music? Is it starting with the lyrics? Like, what does writing look like for you?
So I think there's kind of two forks in
Mm-hmm.
how I approach writing a song. One is if I'm writing an instrumental, I'm usually operating out of the traditional fiddle tune framework where there's maybe three parts to a song. More frequently there'll be two. There'll be an A part and a
Mm-hmm.
B part, and a lot of times I'll get a basic melody idea for that A part, and then modify it a little bit, maybe transpose it to a different key for the B part, And so working in that framework, it's both restrictive but freeing because I've got 32 bars to say what I want to say with my mandolin or my guitar
Mm-hmm.
or my mandola or my banjo, and kind of craft a sonic narrative. Um, that inevitably starts with just maybe an eight note melody that I'm just noodling around and then draw it from there. Um, when it comes to writing songs with lyrics, I find there's more ways to do that for me. Sometimes they come almost fully formed when I sit down, and then like 10 minutes later, I've got a song. It's great. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth and pulling wisdom teeth, and like 6 months later, I'm like, okay, I've got a third verse. This is good.
I feel you because like I know some of my friends. I know how to play instruments, like not play instruments well, but like enough to understand. Like I can play around on the keyboard a little bit, but like I have friends that like sometimes they'll bang out a song in like a night. But then sometimes like they're like, yeah, I'm still working on this one. I don't know. And it's like, weren't you working on that like a year ago? So like I guess that's like a universal experience that people run into, but also I feel like when you leave certain things, just like when you're using like a crock pot, sometimes it gets better over time.
Totally. But I think part of it is also understanding your own headspace. Like I've been doing this February album writing month challenge online, which is
Mm-hmm.
really fun. There's yet more community there, really supportive songwriters, and I was stuck for about a week. I had it just wasn't working. And I was like, oh, I'm not producing anything. But when I finally broke out of the writer's block and came up with another song completely new, like one of those lightning struck 15 minutes later, it was done. I went back and looked at some of the lyrics that I'd been working on while I had writer's block, and I'm like, actually, these aren't bad. A little polishing, a little tweaking, like I've got more songs here. So I think a lot of it is it's hard to get out of your own way sometimes.
I am familiar with that one. I understand. And then also sometimes you try and push and you try and force things, and then it does affect the final product. Not that it's bad, it's just not how it would have been if you took the amount of time on it that you wanted to.
But forcing it results in a different thing,
This
so
is true.
it might not be what you started with, it might not have been the original vision, but it's still a complete idea, it's still a complete thought.
Very true, very true. So I want to like I want to move forward because I know that you're
Mhm.
also a performer. I've had all different kinds of musicians on here. Some of them are like studio projects, some of them are like, singer songwriters, but I know that you've also had a history of performing. Where does a bluegrass act perform in 2024?
Well, I live in New England, which for whatever reason seems to mean that bluegrass music is frequently Sunday afternoon. Like
Okay.
a lot of my shows, particularly with the full string band, wind up being that like Sunday from like 5 to 8 or something. Uh,
Okay. So it's not the late night crowd.
no, no, it's not. But I also play a lot solo,
Mhm.
and do the more kind of singer songwriter type
Okay.
thing. And those can be a little bit more, like I'll be part of a singer songwriter night and I'm on at 10 p.m. on a Friday. Or
Mhm.
I think there's no real right answer because I just email venues, right? And like sometimes they like get back to me and sometimes they don't.
Mhm.
And sometimes I'm surprised by what's on after me. There was one place I played that does a little, I call it chaos booking, that they don't actually
Oh, uh-huh.
curate the evening. So I get on and I'm playing a whole bunch of ripping solos because it's bluegrass. I flat pick. People know Billy Strings. Yeah, I've been, he's from that tradition.
Uh-huh.
And so people were grooving it, loving it. And I'm like, oh, this is a cool crowd. I wonder what's on after me because chaos booking, I didn't even really know what was on. Three electric guitar strong Motley Crue tribute act.
I love that.
Uh, but like the audience loved me and was like, "Oh, cool! This is a great opener for Motley Crue tribute act." So
That's really cool though. Like, this is going to be released later, but this past weekend, I actually saw the Bell Curves, which I found out that you opened up for at one point, which that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense in terms of booking that you would open up for the Bell Curves. But the Bell Curves were totally different than the other acts that night, because they are more in line with like the Americana style, where the other ones like were a bunch of like there was a pop punk band and there was like a heavier rock band, but like, Delaney also has some like cool rock stuff and like all of the solos. So like because those things were similar with like the way that she breaks into solos and the way that you broke into the solos, that probably really resonated with that group. It's just a really cool different act.
I think it's an interesting insight too. Like I think there's a real difference when you go and see a more traditional bluegrass band. Maybe they're all playing around one mic. Uh,
Mm.
it makes the room have to be a quieter space. And one of the things I really got from playing out so much around Northern California was you can plug in and still be fairly true to bluegrass music, but be so much more dominant sound wise in a space. And the technology that's available out there to make acoustic instruments plugged in sound like acoustic instruments is just it's there. It's a tool. And I really love using those tools to put that music in places you wouldn't necessarily see it.
I really like that. And I enjoy the fact that, like, that is something that you've adapted in terms of the style of your performing. When you're doing I guess, the more singer songwriter version of performing versus, like, the group performance,
Mm-hmm.
how do you accommodate for those type of things, like, in terms of your setup? Because I know that different people, like, for instance, like, I know a lot of singer songwriters that show up with, like, an acoustic guitar and a looper pedal. Like, what does a performance look like for you?
I've tried using loopers. My feet do not move fast enough. What I have really adopted and taken up based on one of my favorite performers, John Stickley, is using octave generators. I
Mm.
first went down the Electroharmonics polyphonic octave generator rabbit hole, and it's a pedal that creates, the polyphonic one gives you five different octaves you can make around the bass note. So I'll be taking a solo, and it's not just me noodling high strings on the guitar. There are bass tones being created, and I've moved on to using the Electroharmonics pitchfork pedal because it's just a smaller footprint on my pedal board. It's less options, and I just wasn't using the higher octaves on the polyphonic octave generator. But finding ways to fill the sound out is important to me. Sometimes in a simpler setting, like if it's a songwriter night and I don't want to be like the guy with the effects, I will amp up the bass and mid-range frequencies on my guitar. So when I'm hitting those bass note runs, you can feel the bass note. It's not like all strummy and tinny and high end. It's like there's a full frequency range on my guitar. Uh, One sound guy was like, "You're the only guitarist who doesn't ask me to roll off the low end," and I'm like, "I want that low end."
I like that because it shows that you're putting thought into the whole experience rather than, like, just trying to get the song out. You're creating like the atmosphere for, like, I guess, like, when I'm what I'm trying to like verbalize is like when you mix a song, like if you put headphones on, you space it out. You have the lows, you have the highs, and then, like, you have more of a full sound at your performance, if that makes sense.
Totally, totally.
That's a really great thing that you're like incorporating because I've seen a lot of people not. um, so David, let's get into, like, this is kind of my big question I ask everyone.
Mm-hmm.
For someone that's trying to start out in music, whatever you could take this in whatever direction you'd like. What would be your greatest advice to someone that's trying to just start?
Play music with other people. When you're playing by yourself, when you're creating by yourself, and even if you're an electronic musician and you're in that world of the DAW, share your music. see what other people's ears think about it. If you don't get out of your comfort zone and expose your music to the world, you don't know what the world thinks of it. You don't know how what you think is hitting ears is actually hitting ears. Um, and particularly like if you're playing instruments, play with other people. They will improve you so much. And it comes down to also it's the whole idea of to truly master something, you have to be able to teach it, right? So play music with people who are better than you, but also play music with people who are beginners, who are starting out, where you can see where you started and be like, okay, this is a rabbit hole I fell down. Let's make sure this person doesn't. And when you do that, your own playing is going to improve.
I like that because it gives you like the I guess reflections of yourself. It's kind of using other people's as a form of like mirrors to like see where you are in your own process. So that's a really cool like, way to think about it.
Uh, the other thing that I do that is I teach. I teach mandolin. I teach bluegrass jamming, and the it's hard to find something more fun than having a room full of beginners suddenly click on a song that's it's only three chords. It's not a super complicated melody, but 2 hours earlier they couldn't do it, and you just kind of all of a sudden there's magic.
I understand that. That's a really cool feeling because it's like a we're all growing together feeling.
Exactly, and that's the bluegrass community. It's that's kind of the idea of it. We're constantly trying to not only find new listeners but find new people to jam with.
Very cool, very cool. So David, where can everyone find you on the internet? Where can people listen to your music?
So everything as far as social media, as far as streaming, is under the name Daring Coyotes. There's a long, funny story about a camping trip in Joshua Tree on my website, daringcoyotes.com, if you want to know more about where I got the name from. But that's it. Daring Coyotes. The album is Odyssey of the Far West. There's an outtake single I put out last year, and keep an eye out because there's more music coming soon. A single out next month, and an entire passel of songs I wrote for the songwriting challenge that I'm going to try recording this spring.
Amazing. I'm glad to hear that there's some new stuff coming out, and I wanted to thank you so much for coming on and speaking with me today.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Celia. This has been it's been so fun to see how much has just snowballed from like that first little hey, what's this threads thing? There's people on here. We can talk to each other.
It's been an interesting ride with the Threads community, and it's like sparked so many different things, at least in my life. And like, we'll see where I go from here. Like, I'm glad that we have, like, I'm glad I'm getting to sit with people and get to know them as people rather than just like words on a screen. So this has been really cool. So thank you again. And, to everyone watching, thank you guys for being here too. Make sure that you check out Daring Coyotes, and I will be back for the next interview. So, bye guys.
Thanks, Celia.